Porzingis was one of the most appealing to him because there's a belief if they can get him right, he can help now. Saturday night or whenever Porzingis debuts, that includes, Butler, Draymond, and Porzingis as your front court with Steph as the point guard. I mean, might have something there, but obviously, it's like they could maybe have a future with him, or, if it doesn't work out, he walks this summer and they wipe themselves of this money, and this is part of that.
Anthony, Slater. Slates, how we doing today?
What's up, fellas? How are y'all?
Just hanging out talking football all week, Anthony.
Yeah, it sounds fun there. Y'all just been talking hoops all day today?
All week. Gee, you think? Saw your report that, maybe even as soon as Saturday for Kristaps Porzingis. Let the fans know what the plan is here.
Yeah, they got to get him in. They got to get him through the, Rick Celebrini car wash, which, that's with any player in the league, but obviously, have to go through the physical, but particularly with Porzingis, you want to kind of get your hands on him and see. But, from my understanding, Porzingis was basically ready to be cleared to return in Atlanta. Now, he hasn't played since January 7th. This is going to be a tricky guy to keep healthy, but the calf, from my understanding, is healed, and, we'll see with the illness he's been dealing with. But, unless something changes, the expectation is you'll see Kristaps Porzingis on the floor soon.
Is that where the clearance really lies? Is it the calf? Because the ongoing illness and, the syndrome that he has that's caused him to miss games, those are realities. Is it just down to whether or not the calf is good enough for him to play?
That was what had been keeping him out recently, and like I said, from what my understanding is the calf was basically to the point where it was ready to be cleared to be on the floor. The illness, I kind of got to get a grips on it. I'm sure the Warriors have to. I'm sure everybody has to, because it sounded very mysterious. But I don't know. Is it something he's just going to be dealing with forever? Is there some kind of treatment? I can't give you those answers right now, but the Warriors are going to have to try to figure that out. And this is certainly, I will say, it's another Rick Celebrini project here for sure.
Slates, look, I think we all watched Jonathan Kuminga play a couple of games before he got hurt, and there had been certainly all of the promises that once ready, he would play again. And Steve Kerr even told us on Monday, yes, his role will expand most likely if he's still on the team. But behind the scenes, what's actually going on? Had the two sides arrived at a spot where coexistence was just no longer possible?
No, I mean, look, if he was kept past the deadline and felt the knee was ready, which would have probably happened in the next several days, I expect him to debut pretty early in Atlanta. He would have played, but his feelings and his desires have been made clear, were made clear. So, was this a healthy relationship that should have just continued for years and years? No, but I probably would tell you, and I think y'all would agree, it should have ended a couple of years ago. It was, I thought, driven to a much worse place this past summer. So, again, could he and would he have been on the floor over the last month and a half? Sure, if that was required of him, and it would have helped his value probably, and maybe would have helped him get to a new home this summer, but he's in a new home now. He's in Atlanta.
And when you look at this trade, it seemed like they were all in on Giannis until that wasn't going to happen. Was Porzingis a pivot at the last minute, or had he always kind of been next up on their radar trade-wise?
Yeah, I mean, we reported it going back to prior to the Butler injury, expiring contracts were of more appeal to them. That was such a holdup in the Sacramento talks. They didn't want Monk's contract. They didn't want DeRozan's contract. There was other, bad contracts across the league that they didn't want for Kuminga. And when you looked at some of the expiring contracts across the league, Porzingis was one of the most appealing to them because there's a belief if they can get him right, he can help now. It made more sense as a complementary piece when Jimmy Butler was still here. If Jimmy Butler was still healthy and they made this trade, and you're talking about a starting lineup, Saturday night or whenever Porzingis debuts that includes, Butler, Draymond, and Porzingis as your front court with Steph as the point guard. I mean, might have something there, but obviously, that it has changed. But still, they're going to make I get a little smaller run, I guess they're going to attempt to make down the stretch here. And then if they get Porzingis to a decent place, they control his bird rights. Like, they could maybe have a future with him, or, if it doesn't work out, he walks this summer and they wipe themselves of this money. And I mean, if we're being really two steps back honest, I mean, part of their plotting over the last couple of years is to set themselves up to be really free cap wise a couple summers from now, and this is part of that. This is why, by the way, like when Anthony Davis was the guy that was being talked about, well, Anthony Davis is making big money 3 years from now, like $62 million. That's why a Porzingis is a more appeal to them.
Anthony Slater is with us here on Willard and Dibs, 95.7 The Game. So, Slates, I think that's something that fans could really use right now is the vision. So, okay.
They might not like it.
Yeah, well, but I get that. But what is it? Okay, they've got Porzingis' bird rights, but depending on how he plays and where the health is and everything, what is on the table for the Warriors this summer that gets them into an interesting competitive spot for next year, even just possibly?
Their draft ammo, which they didn't use, and people will say, well, when are you going to use it? Steph Curry's about to turn 38 next month. By the time you do use it, maybe it'll be too late. And, again, maybe they don't end up using it. Maybe the 2030 and 2032 picks that, were supposed to be of such appeal to Milwaukee, maybe the Warriors end up using that in 2030 and 32 because they never traded. But if what is available to them this summer, I mean, it is still utilizing those picks, still trying to utilize the various contracts that they have to go get a big name. Sure, I would remain skeptical going into the summer that they can get deep into the Giannis sweepstakes because I think they were turned down pretty clearly this past week. He's not the only star theoretically that could become available this summer, but again, I'm probably on just the more skeptical side in general. I just think this era is petering out, and this is just kind of the latest chapter of that.
Yeah, and it's kind of a little bit of a buzzkill because we all were starting to think, Giannis, this actually may happen. But before that and beyond that, was there any thought about Anthony Davis and even Jaren Jackson Jr., or were their sights solely set on Giannis until that got expired?
Yeah, they sniffed around on Davis a while ago. This must have been early January. And from what I gathered, his contract, particularly the player option he has a few years from now, and the desire from Davis's side to get an extension, turned them off, number one. And then he has the hand injury, and that completely made them uninterested in going down that avenue. Jaren Jackson, I mean, Ramona reported it today, but they kicked the tires on that the last few weeks. They poked around. I think the price tag was a little too high. Jaren Jackson is stepping into I think it's 4 years, $200-ish million. I mean, I think he's starting next season around 50. And he's, he is a good player. He certainly would have elevated this team and could have been a nice piece of the core. But, if you're paying him $4 for $200 over the next several years and you're sending, 2 to 3 first-round picks out for it, that's a risky move. It carries risk, and clearly they weren't ready to go down that road.
Slates, is the maneuvering over the last 24 to 48 hours an admission of something by this Warriors front office? And if it is, what?
They're not going for it this year. I would say it's probably the clearest thing, right? I think it's an admission that the Butler ACL tear ended their outside chance at contention this year. And I think they're going to attempt to put up a puncher's fight of, trying to get through the play-in and being a threat in the first round. But they kind of reset their own internal expectations, went after their white whale in Giannis. I think, it was made pretty clear that wasn't going to happen. And then they just kind of, I think they're taking the L in a sense a little bit this year.
It seemed like over the last couple of days, the idea of Draymond being traded became a reality. Was that just a trial balloon, or is that something that is worth revisiting this summer if he, in fact, opts in?
Well, I mean, look, if Milwaukee pulls the trigger Draymond Green is very likely out the door, right? Milwaukee kind of had their choice in a lot of ways of which package, but I feel comfortable saying that. Draymond Green will be an expiring contract this summer. I expect him to pick up his player option just because market dynamics there. And this isn't just a Draymond Green commentary. This is veterans across the league. Klay Thompson, I would throw in this category. They're a lot easier to move when they're expiring money. Zach LaVine in Sacramento will have 1 year and 40-something million left. He'll be a lot easier for the Kings to move, and you can be a lot more creative come summertime with those type of contracts. So, again, I would put Draymond in that bucket. We'll see how this year ends. We'll see what's on the table to them this summer. But certainly, to a degree, that box has at least publicly been opened a little bit.
Slates, you're one of the few who can answer this, and I think it's on the fans' minds a lot, even though there's no, credible worry. Where does this all leave Steph Curry and his future desires?
Look, every conversation I've had with Steph Curry, he has, maintained a very, straight and narrow, wants to finish his career with the Warriors. Obviously, he wants to compete, till the finish line. He calls it meaningful basketball. He's not just talking about, 5 rings or bust. He's talking about good, big second round series, kind of the run they went on last year. So sure, he would love that. But, he was there the night Jimmy Butler tore his ACL. He understands, some of the dynamics at play. He's been very reasonable in his commentary on, should the Warriors, push every single chip in no matter what. And, I am curious to hear exactly his messaging maybe the next time he talks. But I have been given no indication that, he sees anything else except what he's always said, which is, his career being a one-team career with the Warriors.
And that being said, Kristaps hopefully can come back and be healthy and stay healthy. But short of that, the Steph Curry knee issue, is that something to be concerned about the rest of this year? And might they make a decision to just kind of shut him down to an extent?
We'll see. That's not a decision that is made today or will be made today. I saw him at shoot-around this morning. He was kind of joking with me because I had my little TV set up for our trade deadline special, and he came by and was almost looking at the setup. And but he was in a good mood. He's laughing, he's joking, he's going to do his individual workout and kind of test the knee a little bit. I said be careful. I would say there is more of an appetite to really kind of manage him down the stretch without this belief that they're making some, sprint to the championship here. But I don't expect you're going to hear something in the next day or two that they're going to shut him down.
Anthony Slater, ESPN with us, Willie and Dibby right here on 95.7 The Game. Slates, I want to know, what do you think the Warrior front office has learned from all of this? If you go back to, we're drafting projects, but we're also winning, and that's how we're going to do it. The 2 timelines thing, to me, that officially comes to a final chapter today. What do you think the whole group has learned from this experience?
They went after kind of toolsy prospects that didn't fit their coach's style. I think that, you go back to not just the draft picks, like the Kelly Oubre, and of that era, they kind of got away from what had been successful. And I think, in some ways you've seen as Mike Dunleavy's taken over, they've kind of recorrected some of their, fit versus, talent type choices because they've kept Steve Kerr around. And you've seen some of the draft picks over the last several years, they kind of fit the system or even some of the fringe type guys. But, what did they learn? I think they just learned that they missed on those lottery picks. And that's when you miss on 2, 7, and Moses Moody, I think at 14, certainly there was guys there that could have helped more. But when you miss to that degree and you don't have an alignment with, kind of your coach's style, then you get burned and eventually you pay the price. And, I think a potential rebuild in the years to come post-Steph Curry will be just, their failures in those drafts.
Anthony, I guess here's kind of what I mean by that. If we keep hearing that, Steve Kerr wanted Franz Wagner. Steve Kerr wanted Tyrese Haliburton. Are Joe Lacob's fingerprints all over these picks? Is he making picks, Anthony?
Joe Lacob was very influential in those 2 seasons, those picks. I will say Steve Kerr will say this too. He said it on the record. He was all in on Wiseman. The whole organization was all in on Wiseman. I thought it was a good pick, to be honest. That one was a consensus. Lacob, obviously, I think it's well known, it's well reported, was very much, a Kuminga backer. And to this day, still, I believe in the talent. I mean, I, to a degree, believe in the talent. The fit, I think we all would agree, hasn't necessarily been there. But you'd say in the past few seasons, these have been Mike Dunleavy front office picks. He's not, Joe Lacob's not finding Will Richard highlights and deciding that's the guy, or, looking at Boston College and picking Quentin Post. But if you go back to what felt like franchise-changing picks, 2 and 7, consensus on 2 with Wiseman, miss. More of a Joe Lacob-fueled pick at 7, Kuminga. Again, I don't think he's a miss like Wiseman necessarily was, but he's, it has led to this moment, and they probably held on to him too long. I guess that's part of it. I don't know. There's so many layers to all of it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Hey, man, I know it's such a busy time. We really appreciate you jumping on.
Yep, no problem.